to the democratically elected leader. Jeremy Corbyn, MP.
Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. And can we start with a big thank you to Essex Fire Brigade Union coming here today to unveil this new banner. And I have to say, the Fire Brigade Union has been fantastic in their help and support for everything that we're doing in this campaign. And I want to thank all of you for coming out here today, because this at one level is a campaign about the leadership of the Labour Party, but it's also a campaign about our community, our society, our party and our movement. And I stress the collective in this. It's our campaign for our communities and our movement. Merthyr is a place of the most amazing history and the most amazing struggle. What I really admire is the way in which, despite all the difficulties, the artistic talent is here. The opportunities for theatre, dance, drama, art, poetry, music, everything is developing and continuing here, because we are not just economic beings, we're also social beings, we're also people who want our children to grow up not being afraid of their own imagination and their own artistic and cultural. Some time ago we did the S.O. Davis Memorial Lecture, and I was very proud to do that, and I've still got the gifts I was given at the end of it. Some of them I'm eating were Welsh cheese, some of them were jam, and one of them is a bottle of Welsh cider. Since I don't drink cider, it's standing there in all its glory and all its majesty for every visitor to my house to see. So thank you all for coming here today. And this square, of course, is the scene of the massacre of 1831, the way in which the people of Merthyr rose up against unemployment, against reduction in wages, the way in which the military were brought in to suppress that movement. What were those people protesting about? They were protesting about injustice. They wanted bread, they wanted homes, they wanted jobs, they wanted some security in their lives. When they were attacked by the military, one person, Penderyn, was ultimately executed some time later. And many, many years later, deathbed conversion, somebody admitted it was they who did it, not him. There is a campaign to clear his name. Let's support that campaign. Pierre Hardy, of course, was the MP for Merthyr. Who can ever forget that, and who could ever not recognise the amazing contribution he made? A child labourer in mines in Scotland grew up to become a famed and fabled trade union organiser. Ultimately, the leader of the Labour Party, the first elected Labour MP, who not only was the MP for this town, but in many ways he was the MP for the oppressed in so many other places. He spoke up in Parliament at a time when few would have dreamt or dared to do so, about injustices in South Africa, about injustices in India and Australia and in the United States. He travelled the world in search of peace. He worked so hard to try to prevent the First World War and worked with socialist movements and trade unions all across Europe to try to bring about a peace rather than the carnage that followed. And he said from the very balcony up there that we've just been to, and I quote, "The ILP, the Independent Labour Party, has pioneered progress in this country, is breaking down sex barriers and class barriers, is giving a lead to the great women's movement as well as to the great working class movements." Keir was a man who said, You cannot liberate the working class unless you end discrimination on the basis of gender. Women should be treated equally as men and given a vote as equally as men. So when Tyrone was talking, I've known Tyrone ever since the miners' strike. It was a privilege, a pleasure and an honour to get to know him during the strike, and the fantastic work that he and everyone else in Tower Colony and all the other colonies did to try and protect the mining industry, destroyed as an act of political vandalism by the Tory government of the 1980s. And it was instructive for everyone that the inner city community that I'm proud to represent in Parliament collected money, food, clothes and everything else to send to the mining communities. And in return, the mining communities came to our inner city community. Both communities realised they were actually facing the same problem of an economic strategy which was about rolling back the state, rolling back the provision of communities, rolling back all that we had achieved and gained in favour of greater inequality, greater injustice, greater wealth for the few, and abysmal poverty for the many. That's what Thatcherism was, that's what austerity is, that's what neoliberal economics is. That is why we have to do things very, very differently. So at one level this is an election of the leader of the Labour Party, and I'm very proud of the support we received last year and the way in which this campaign is already getting underway. We're travelling the whole of the UK. We're reaching out to every community in every part of this country. Yes, in order to take part in this election. Yes, in order to strengthen our party, but also to reach out to those who become disillusioned with politics because they don't see a political solution to their problems of education and housing and health and all the other things, to bring people in the whole spirit and strength of a Labour movement that unites everybody and doesn't blame minorities. So, our campaign is about jobs, it is about investment. And when Ivan was talking earlier about the treatment of agricultural workers, I grew up in a farming community in the Midlands, in Shropshire, and in those days it wasn't good, but there was an agricultural wages board covering the whole of the UK. It meant that at least there was a minimal condition for agricultural workers across the country. And by a lot of campaigning, we got rid of the tied cottage system and all that went with that. It's only in Wales that there's still an agricultural wages board. Well done, Unite the Union, for its work in support of agricultural workers. All of us realise that there can be poverty in rural areas, however beautiful and idyllic they look. When you're poor and you're living in a private rented accommodation with insecure tenancy, expensive rent, lack of bus services, and all the other things that go with it, you are poor as isolated as if you're living in a back street somewhere in one of our big cities or elsewhere. It's poverty we have to address, it's investment that we need across the whole country. And so there are campaigns that are so important. Tyrone and others were talking about the plight of the steel industry. We remember what Thatcher tried to do to the steel industry. We remember the jobs that were lost, the investment that was wasted, and the way the industry was run down. And now the dangers are all there again. As far as I'm concerned, the steel industry is a central part of the manufacturing economy of this whole country. And therefore, I've been very pleased to be able to work with those that work at Port Talbot to try and protect those jobs, protect the supply chain jobs that go with it. And say quite clearly this, it is the duty of a government, any government, to be prepared to intervene when an industry is facing troubles. We shouldn't allow our economic future to be argued out by distant global multinational corporations. It should be the responsibility of democratic governments to be involved in economic development and protection of those jobs. And then you look at the lack of investment that has taken place all over the country in former mining areas. Those areas that had that fantastic strength of community brought about by the miners' union, by the role of the miners' welfare, by the whole spirit of those communities. The mines might have closed, but it's pretty clear to me the spirit of those communities is there, strong and demanding real political change in Britain. And if you look at injustices and inequality in employment practices across Britain, you need look no further than the former Shirebrook Colliery in Nottinghamshire. Shirebrook was a modern colliery, was fully unionised, had a multinational workforce who worked together, never blamed each other. They worked together to improve each other's conditions. Indeed, my friend, the great Dennis Skinner, worked in that very pit at one time. And Dennis, by the way, is strongly supporting this campaign. And what is it now? Sport Direct factory, where there is a company that runs on behalf of Sport Direct the process within the warehouse and within the facilities there. And the facilities there are absolutely disgraceful. And even the Select Committee report, all parties Select Committee report, absolutely condemned them for the danger in the workplace, the systematic underpayment of workers, the 0 hours contracts culture, the calling of ambulances because people couldn't get out of the factory to get urgent medical attention when needed. Likewise, the number of fire brigade incidents that have been called there to deal with safety in that factory. What is it about modern Britain that somehow or other we believe economic progress is best made by suppressing wages, worsening conditions and treating workers with no respect whatsoever? So I'm suggesting for a very start, any middle-sized, reasonable company has got to negotiate with trade unions. We will repeal the Trade Union Act and we will take back real positive rights at the workplace. Because those positive rights at the workplace are so important. We want decency and respect within our society just as much as we will support the Agency Workers Directive to prevent the exploitation of agency workers and the Posting of Workers Directive amendments which will stop the importation of underpaid, grossly exploited workers to undercut paying conditions that have been agreed in various countries. It's about the issue of exploitation that we agreed on and is so important. But there is so much else within our society that is so important. Aaron Bevan, MP, created the National Health Service. Personally, he gave everything to it, but in effect, he was a product of his time, his community, his place. He wanted a health service free at the point of use, as a human right for everybody. What we have now, yes, we have a National Health Service. All of us here rely on that National Health Service, but it's systematically underfunded across the UK. I admire the Welsh Government for abolishing prescription charges. I admire them for ending the ridiculous internal market within the National Health Service. I congratulate them for that. But I say this, the underfunding of public services across the whole of the UK is a major problem. And the Health and Social Care Act that applies particularly in England means that 49% of all NHS services are out of privatisation. It's the systematic destruction of our National Health Service. If they're allowed to go on with this treatment of the NHS across the whole of the UK by a combination of punitive laws in England and underfunding in Wales and Scotland, then what do we end up with? Instead of the health service as the first port of call for all of us whenever we need medical help, it will gradually be leached away. Private medicine will begin to take over, and instead of being our health service, will be like the remaining public health services in parts of the USA, will be a place of last resort when you can't afford to go anywhere else. Are we going to accept that or not? No, of course we're not. We have to be absolutely determined on the principle of a health service as a human right free at the point of use. But there's also an issue of the mental health services